Good morning, everyone. Mike here. Happy Independence Day. Happy 4th of July. Happy Secessionist Day. Happy birthday, America. Whatever way you say it, they all mean the same thing, right? Today marks the 244th anniversary of some wise men declaring their independence, their freedom from an oppressive government and a monarchy known as King George III. And 244 years later, in 2020, we're celebrating this word, independence, this word, liberty. But I don't think they mean the same thing today in 2020 as they did in 1776. We can look at the history of this country and we can have discussions and conversations about what really happened and what really took place. We can look at the men in 1776 and we can take one idea and say, well, these men wanted freedom and liberty for all mankind. And we can look at the opposite side of the coin and say, well, these men were slaveholders, right? And we can look at the history of America and how slavery was an oppressive force that actually existed until 1865 when it was actually declared no longer legal. We can talk about all the ideologies all over America as independent people, as sovereign people, and we can talk about oppression, and we can talk about racism, we can talk about all the bad things that ever took place. And that's going to be another discussion for another day. But I want to talk about the idea of liberty, the idea that we have, that we are commemorating this day. Because I don't think that liberty means the same as it did. The men in 1776 thought of it one way. But how are we thinking of it in 2020? What does liberty really mean today? Well, if you study English language, you're going to know that words have meanings, and they have root meanings, and that they evolve over time. Etymology will say that so many words will come from so many different places, and as we understand where they come from, we understand what their true source and where they're derived from. So today I want to talk about this word liberty. It actually comes from the word Liber, L-I-B-E-R. Now the word Liber has been around for centuries, and many words in the English language have actually been derived from that same word, L-I-B-E-R, Liber. Of course, we're talking about the word liberty, but other such words such as library, such as liberal, such as libertine, such as libations actually comes from Liber too. It's an interesting story. See, in Latin, the word Liber, L-I-B-E-R, means tree bark. Tree bark back in those times was where written word was actually kept. Much like the Egyptians wrote things on papyrus, the ancient Greeks actually wrote things on tree bark. Their philosophies, their writings, the words of the wise ones. Okay, so in Greek philosophy, Liber actually means, it comes from botany, it comes from tree bark. It actually evolved into the word what's known as book, where things are kept, right? That's what Liber actually means. And if you fast forward from Greek times to ancient Roman times, the word Liber has a similar root. It actually comes from a god that they called the god of wine, meaning the plants, right? The god of wine was known as Liber, but he was also known as the free one. So not only did it mean the god of wine, but it meant the freedom of speech. And in Roman times, Liber was a male, and his sister, Libertas, was the sister, or the female version of the word of liberty. That's where it came from. But that word liberty didn't mean what we think it means today. It didn't necessarily mean freedom. Freedom of speech came from the education, because it did have a root in tree bark, where wise men would write down their words. So Liber actually means education. Now, as I mentioned, different words came from that same place. So I'll use the Roman god of wine, Liber, to fast forward into the future where the word libations come from. Libations means the offering of liquid, mainly wine or alcohol, to the male god of fertility, Liber. So libations means let's have a drink together, right? But other words like library actually comes from the same root. Liber meant wise words written down. Library is obviously a collection of books, right? Where education is going to be found, from the library. Now, if you look at the astrological sign of Libra, or Libra, it means generally the same thing. Libra was a female goddess of justice, right? So we often see the scale of liberty because it means justice, it means balance, okay? It means diplomacy. It means intelligence. And we gather intelligence through literature, through writing. It doesn't mean coercion or force, it means communication. It means shared communication, shared intelligence. That's where Libra comes from. The astrological sign is between September and October, Libra, but that's what it really means. And of course, Liber comes from that again, education and diplomacy, and liberal is another word that comes from Liber. Liberal in today's world means something a little bit different. It often means more government, but the word liberal itself just means a wide range of subjects. So if you think of liberal education, it means that you are well read in many different places, right? It means it's generous, it's unrestricted. That's what liberal really means. So to offer something liberal means that you give a lot of it, you give more of it. You don't have any kind of limitations on it. So that's what liberal really means. But it also means tolerant of views. It means tolerant of ideas. And so to be liberally minded means that you are accepting of other ideas, of other views, that you're not just focusing on one type of thing. So when you think of liberty and how the founding fathers in 1776 wanted to have a Liber education, it meant to have a deep, wide education, right? There's 3 levels of education. I'm going to attribute this to a guy by the name of Oliver DeMille, who gave a great speech about the 3 different levels of education. And he talks about how there is what's known as the employee or the general education, where people know just enough to be functioning adults, to take care of their families, and do the job that they are required to do. There's what he calls the professional education, right? Which is a specialty field or something like that. So you might be an electrician, or you might be an accountant, or you might be some kind of professional who has a specialized knowledge in one area, right? Most of the time, if you have a specialized knowledge, you're going to be like the boss or the employer versus the employee. But to have a Liber education means that you have a wide range of knowledge, right? Going back to all the wisdom that was ever written down. To have a Liber education means that you literally are well read. You have leadership traits, right? Not just what to think, not just a specialty in one area, but it teaches you how to think. It's actually critical thinking skills and be able to have a wide range of different philosophies. So to have a Liber education means that you were very knowledgeable, you were diplomatic, you were intelligent, you didn't use coercion or use force. So that word actually evolved into what liberty means today. So liberty, as was penned in 1776, meant that they wanted to be free and independent thinkers because King George III thought one way. They were oppressive, they were restricted, they were oppressed. But to be free and to have a liberal education, to have an abundance of thought, of ideas, that's where liberty actually came from. Right? So when you liberate somebody, you're actually freeing them from oppression. You're freeing them from slavery. Right? If you're a libertine, that really just means that you're abusing the education. You're doing it for things that are not good, right? But generally speaking, when you have liberty, you're going to be more intelligent. You're gonna understand that there's a balance between freedom and force, right? There's an abundance of information, right? So to have liberty means that you have education, means that you have knowledge. Now here in 2020, we can look at the government. We can look at the restrictions that they put on us, right? We can also look at the culture of the people in this country. We can look at the limited ideas we have. We have one side of the fence that wants everybody to behave a certain way. You see people knocking down statues and eliminating history and talking about the oppression and talking about slavery and talking about different types of ways that men have been made victims. And we have the other side that wants to preserve certain things, wants to preserve certain traditions, right? Certain customs, and want life to be one way or the other. So the culture in this country is not very Liber oriented. They're not very educated because they want one thing or the other. They don't want to have an abundance of ideas. They don't want to tolerate other types of views, right? They have that employee mindset, right? They know just enough about a bunch of different subjects to to operate in this world. We have some people who are more special to this, right? People who have professional acumen, people who understand certain things, but they don't have a broad base of information, right? And so to be Liber means to be well read. It means to think beyond just a certain number of things. It means to accept all different types of ideas, right? That's what the founding fathers had in this country. They had Liber education. They wanted liberty because liberty meant education, and the more education you had, the more freedom you have. And in 2020, that's what we need the most. So if we're celebrating the 4th of July, it's not because that we had a government that was created that escaped from another oppressive government. We have liberty to have thought, to have deep thoughts, to tolerate and to explore and to expand our knowledge. That's what Liber means. That's what liberty means. Right? To have that liberal education. So understand that if we want freedom, we're not going to get it from government. We're not going to get it from fighting a war. We're going to have liberty through our education, through what we read. We need to train people to be liberally educated, to be Liber thinkers, to expound on ideas, and to think critically, right? Unrestricted. That's what liberty means. And I know that as long as we continue our education, we continue our expansion of knowledge, we continue our justice, we continue our tolerance, and we understand that these things are supposed to be given to us by a higher power, then we'll have more liberty. So today on the 4th of July, remember where liberty comes from. It's not just because of a political thing that happened. It's because the men and women in this country have the freedom to think critically, to look at things, to be tolerant, and to understand classical literature. That's all I got today. Have liberty. Have a deep understanding of life. Know where it comes from. Know who gave it to you. And even if we have governments that oppress those things, even if we have governments that want to take them away, even if we have a culture of people who want to oppress you and want to take them away, what you have in your mindset, what you've read, what you understand, will increase your level of education. The more education you have, the more Liber you have. The more Liber you have, the more liberty you have. And that's all I wanted to share with you today. Have an awesome day.